Meritocracy is a really interesting discussion point. We had an example in the agency I work in when we thought we were being meritocratic, but we probably fell into the trap of men having wider social networks. So they were more widely known by the widest number of people. I'd just love to hear your views on that subject, when you think you're being meritocratic, but actually...
Shall I go first? There's so much to say about this. One of the roundtables that we ran, and there's a whole bunch of senior business people there, including a number of representatives from various women's networks. The energy shifted in the room when we started talking about meritocracy, because so much of the experience of people trying to work in this field, in the diversity and inclusion field, had been told time after time in organisation after organisation, yes, 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 but you must understand that we just hire the best. Well, that's just simply not true. If you've got 50% women, 50% men at the bottom when people are recruited at entry, and then further up the ladder it's 10% women, 90% guys, that clearly isn't true. So something's going wrong. We don't have organisational meritocracy, I don't believe. And I think it's a get out, and I think the answer is that we need to understand much, much more about what we mean when we say that we have a job to do. We have a job that needs doing. And we need to understand a lot more about what it is that we mean by that job in order to recruit effectively for it. There's lots of research that... Anyway, sorry.
I think you need to give people objective measures, and then you can measure who's the best. Because I think men have risen to the top where there's a lot of perception, there's a lot of subjective. You know, the male board will sit round, decide who's best, and vote one. But we've done a lot of work on work plans, and in fact, everybody's measured on how they build a business and how they build the organisation, and you get 2 ratings and pay benefits, promotions 50-50 on business and organisation, and putting organisation in has really helped women a lot. But I think if you talk about meritocracy and you've no idea what the measures are, then you'll make no progress at all. You'll just stay where you are. If you change the measures and everybody knows what's expected of them. I think our measures are also, you're not expected just to tick the box and go home. Everybody who'll get to the top will over-deliver. We'll do things that were never in the work plan. We'll do things that nobody imagined. You know, we'll go grow businesses that nobody told them to do. So I think there's also an understanding amongst women of what being the best is. Being the best isn't ticking everything on your shopping list. Being the best is inventing things out of the box, doing things differently, and taking an organisation with you, having a vision, engaging others, and making extraordinary things happen all of the time.
I'd also add to that, I think it's also about is it craft skill or is it leadership? And I think in leadership, you're expected to understand and be knowledgeable and inspire at every level on every subject if you possibly can. Whereas if it's a craft skill and you're the very, very best art director or you're the very best HR director or whatever it may be, then maybe you're not expected to be as good on some of the broader skills. So that's important. I will say one thing on the networking thing, by the way. I get asked a lot about networking, particularly by women. And I think that the networking side of things seems to continue to be a challenge. And I think organisations like the IPA and WACL and others provide that for women, but I think men tend to be much more able, maybe because of their wiring as competitive nature, to be able to walk in a room and speak to anybody. I certainly have had to almost train myself to do that, and I will do it, but there's always a moment at a CES conference or something where I feel slightly inadequate and less qualified to go up to someone and start talking to them, and the networking measure with women can be very important. One of the questions we ask in the leadership interviewing that we do at Lighthouse is about your black book. It is about how networked are you, and in not a playing golf networking sense, I really mean a business context of networking and black book. And that measure is very important to our hiring clients, whether they publicly admit it or not. And I think if you are someone who is therefore more visible, that is quite important to some companies when they're hiring, particularly at leadership level. Right, wrong or indifferently, there's something in that. And again, if you're rushing home to relieve the nanny, the childcarer, if you have children, not everybody does, then that can be a challenging thing too. And someone like Carolyn McCall, who used to run The Guardian, is now EasyJet, had a rule when she had her children, which was 3 nights a week, you can do what you like with me, Mr. or Mr. PA. Send me wherever you want. I'll go to board meetings, dinners, networking events, whatever I need to do. But 2 nights of the week, I leave at 5, I'm home for my children, and nothing will come across that. And it is, again, about boundaries, just to answer the networking point.
Thank you. Anybody else? Kate?
Hello, Roisin. I just want to ask a question to Roisin. Given the more utopian environment or the advantages that are afforded to women and men at P&G. What's the board look like there? What's the split today?
Today it's 50-50. So we've got a UK board. It's never in any of the statistics because we're quoted in New York and not here, but it's 50-50. And then I've got a marketing board that's 50-50 as well. We're recruiting today about 57% female, and which we think we'll need to maintain that 50-50. And then we think it's essential to have the flex work, the career breaks. Everybody sits down on a regular basis and looks at their career plan. It is much, much easier in a big company. It's much, much more difficult in a small company. And I think it genuinely is much easier in a client. We have got a very stable business. We're not going to go bankrupt tomorrow. I don't think anybody's going to buy us tomorrow. We're not going to lose clients. And it is much more of a challenge when you're a small business, when you're volatile, when you lose a government, suddenly COI stops advertising, and it affects the income of your agency. It's more difficult to plan those things and invest in people, but it's really important.
Could I be cheeky and ask just one more question about quotas in that case, looking across from your businesses, the smaller businesses that are representative of most businesses in the UK and globally? What do you think about quotas? Because we looked at Norway and how successful, and if we look at Scandinavian countries, they're much better at talking about co-parenting versus maternity leave, and the language of business is actually more gender neutral over there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't love quotas. And I think quotas can lead you to positive discrimination. I've worked in the US, I've seen positive discrimination. And I think if you put a less able woman in charge, you're not doing women or the company any favours. Norway, I've seen mixed data, frankly. I think the number of women on the board has increased, but the number of women in middle management has not increased. And sadly, a lot of the women on the board are non-exec, and there's the niece factor. If you look at the women who got on boards very quickly, their daughters, nieces, granddaughters, and they're not necessarily running the business. And I'm still waiting to see the Norwegian companies, has it really changed? I worked in Finland for a couple of years, and I think sometimes you just have to do things a bit differently. When I worked in Finland, they told me to learn Finnish because it would be the business language of the future. That was a mistake. I can understand the Hungarians, I can't understand anybody else on the planet.
So I was going to ask, as you get up and towards the top of a company, it gets competitive, both males and females. Do you find, though, that getting near the top, that's more of an issue, females and females? Is there more of a female competition, or does it become something that women are supporting each other? I'm not sure. So I was going to ask you.
Who was that directed to, Kathleen?
Anyone who wants to answer, really.
Do you want to start, Kathleen?
I'll have a go. I think there's lots talked about women being mean to other women, and equally there's lots talked about women who are incredibly supportive of each other as well. I think there's a couple of things in here. One, of course, it gets more competitive the more senior you become in an organisation, and I'm sure, I don't know about client side, but certainly agency side and definitely media owner side, it becomes pretty ferocious. And if you're not up for that competition, you're not ready to take that competition, it can be a very difficult, lonely experience at times. Secondly, I think the more senior you get, you have to learn to deal with conflict. And again, if we are as females more innate to try and collaborate and soothe and to make things okay, there are times when things are not okay and you have to go into conflict. But women can be very good at getting to resolution in conflicts in a way that's not necessarily taking somebody outside. So I think there is, you have to be ready for conflict, you have to be ready for competition. I've found in my career that I've had incredibly supportive women. I've worked for 7 or 8 companies before I ran my own company, and I've probably had 5 female bosses, all of whom have been incredibly supportive of me, and actually I found inspiring. So the inspirational piece has helped me as an individual. I think that I definitely, when I was younger, had a part of being the youngest at doing something or the first female to do something. And I'm sure there must have been, if I'm really honest, a little bit of me that therefore was competitive against the next woman coming up. But I really think it's a generational thing, and I feel that we're beyond that in the businesses that I work with now, and certainly in our business at the Lighthouse.
I think at the board you have to build alliances, and you have to do that effectively with other women and other men. And there are areas where you want to find like-minded people to collaborate with. So I've always found that at P&G and kind of we're obviously in the same business. I've recently joined the ASA board, which is a bit more, there's 12 completely individual characters, so we're judging which of the ads that you make should be banned forever. And within those 12, there's myself and Hamish Pringle, who've got any experience of advertising advertising. And then there's interesting people like the former Poet Laureate, who has never written an ad and never will, and a lot of very interesting characters. And it's been interesting because they want to be diverse, and they've got 5 women and 7 men. But on different issues, I have built relationships and I've built alliances with some of the men or some of the women. But I think it's important to spend a lot of time outside the boardroom or spend a lot of time with people outside the office and just find like-minded people that you can change things together, that you can understand. Frankly, you can cry on their shoulder when it all goes belly up, which it will do from time to time, but they can be kind of men or women. And I haven't found any kind of evil women who kind of hated me and wanted me to die because I got the job they wanted. But I have worked for women who had no understanding whatsoever of what it was like to be a working mum. So my first boss was a Mexican who had 9 staff. My first female boss was a Mexican woman who had 9 staff. There I was, a brand manager, ferociously running around trying to kind of juggle work and dinner party. I had no kids then, but life was difficult enough to kind of clean my toilet. And she said, "Oh, you're having a dinner party, you know, what are you having made?" No, I've got to go and shop and then make it. And I think quite often women don't necessarily empathise with the challenges you've got. I mean, I've found kind of women with children had no empathy for me when I didn't have children. They thought I could work 24/7, I shouldn't really have a life because I wasn't a mother. So different people have got different relationships. But I think the more honest you can be with people and the more honest you can be with yourself, the better. Quite often when women are competitive or you know, they're catty, whatever, they just don't realise the impact it might have on you. And so I quite often with men or women, I'll just kind of hold up the mirror. You know, when you said this, it made me feel like that. When you said that to them, this is what it did to their confidence. And I think you've got to stick your head above the parapet and just take some risks and tell people what they're doing to you, because nobody else will do it for you. I was on holiday last year, and in the spa there was this beautician, and she said, you know, she'd been with the company 3 years and she really wanted to be a manager. And then the next day her manager flew in and she was doing her assessment. And this girl was sitting there, so she gets an assessment every year, and the girl was reading out the questionnaires, you know, how do you rate yourself on relationships with people on a score of 1 to 10? She's going 5, 5, 5, 5, and I'm sitting thinking, oh shit, you know, she's never going to be a manager. So I went up and interrupted her and I said, you know, I've got kind of an emergency, and I walked around kind of the pool and I said, look, nobody is going to speak up for you. You know, this person's going to fly out and you will never be a manager again. Kind of listen to the little voice in your head. If you want to be a manager, say 10, 10, 10. And she went back and she had that conversation. I didn't go and sit near her because I thought that will terrify her. But she came up to me at dinner and she said, that was just amazing. She said, nobody has ever told me to do that. And I think whether you're a woman or a man, you've got to stand up for yourself. And I think you've got one friend, and a couple of you have heard me talk about this before, but this little voice in your head, you know, and it tells you when things are right, when things are wrong, when things are out of balance, you know, and it says go for it, and take some risks.
I agree with all of that. The only thing that I would say and add is that business is about relationships. Business success is about successful relationships, of course. One of the things that I've had experience of, both through Tomorrow's Company and in my wider business life, is supporting the rising generation of young women coming through. I mean, running various internship programs, volunteer programs, and so on. And I just want to reinforce that point, is that often the careers advice or the kind of mentoring or those kinds of really, really kind of critical relationships that young people need, young women need too, just are not there. And we need to work hard to try and put that together. It's not just for minority ethnic, but for everybody, really, I think. And there's an enormous amount of work that needs to be done in that field, and there are a number of organisations that are working very hard to change it.
And if you haven't got a mentor at work, I'd recommend everybody gets a mentor. Even if it's somebody you've never spoken to before but really respect, just kind of go ask them, and it's an informal relationship. The great thing about mentors is you can ignore everything they say when they don't agree with you. With a boss, you can't always do that, but it is incredibly important, and it's important to have mentors and a network outside your office as well, because you want to move companies, and in this industry, it is incredibly important.
One of the things I just add to that we'll find is that people that often come to us who are about to make the leap from MD to CEO or from commercial director to MD is they don't have mentors, and often having them externally, as you say, you can really say how you feel if you trust that mentor and can share it, even a situation that's going on, if you feel comfortable to do that. And I think go as senior as you dare. Ask that, you know, very, very senior people in the business actually are very flattered to be asked, and for the cost of buying them a lovely lunch, often they'll happily give you a regular sort of 6-week catch up to see how things are. And I've certainly found that personally beneficial, but I get surprised actually how many females and males don't have an external mentor somewhere in their working world, and I can't recommend it enough.
And the only one more thing to add is that is I think that difference is really, really important. So one of the things that happens in some of the conversations I have with the kind of rising generation, new graduates emerging, is that they've operated in, their networks are all people the same as them. And one of the things that's really important is to meet other people that are not the same as you, because they've got stories to tell and experiences that they can share that's really, really important. That's the power of diversity, that's the power of difference, and we need to use it in our own lives as well as in our own organisations.
Fantastic, brilliant advice. Okay, one more? Okay.
I'd just like to ask the panel, really, to what degree do you think, it feels to me as though men get a lot of their kind of personal life and friendships out of an extension of their work colleagues, as opposed to friends outside of work? And it strikes me that women don't feel such a need to gain friendships through their work colleagues, because we've got plenty of them outside of work and we've got our family as well. And therefore, until there becomes a critical mass of women on the board, then maybe men just want to work alongside other men whom they can just go and have a beer with and talk about the sport and their bikes or whatever. Would you agree?
Shall I start?
Yeah, go on then, Graham. You start.
Sorry. No, I don't think I do. I don't think I do agree. One of the themes that I was thinking about raising in my presentation was the theme of laziness. So one of the things that's kind of emerging from our research is that organisations are really, really lazy. They tend to sort of sloop to a kind of lowest common denominator. So, and if it's been run by men, then they tend to replicate their own relationships and so on in the way that you say. The issue for me in terms of business success is that how do we get this business to be successful ahead? What is it that we need to do in order to create value of all sorts of different kinds? And when you get onto that journey, then all sorts of things become possible. Innovation, lots of things. And that comfort zone that we're all in, that laziness, as it were, I think that needs to be challenged, particularly if we're going to meet the challenges of the age of sustainability and all those things. So I think that men maybe find themselves in a kind of comfortable position in organisations, that's where all the mates are and so on. But that needs to be shaken up if the business is going to be successful ahead and if we're going to be successful as a society ahead.
I'm not so convinced it's a male-female thing, personally, my take on it. I think that there is definitely a line that you step over with work colleagues that then become friends, and you tend to find that you pick up 3 or 4 as you move through your business career. And I think that they're the people that you will stay in touch with and still have lunch with, and sometimes hopefully will become useful to you in business as well. But I think it is about stepping over the line from colleague to friendship or client to friendship, and often that just comes purely out of doing things together out of work. Where she was talking about doing things outside of the organisation, but I think also it's often about sharing and being really brutally honest. You're probably going to share something that may be very emotionally difficult right now or physically difficult or whatever it may be, and that just takes you over that line, and they tend to be the friendships and contacts actually that stay with you, and you will go the extra mile for that individual because somehow they've bared something or somehow they've shown you a little bit into their soul. And I think that's what I also see happening just generically in business right now, is that those sense of real gritty, honest relationships are those that are bearing greater fruit. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a male or a female thing. That line for me is blurring. I'm finding males far more able to bear all, certainly an interview with me, to really, we ask a lot about, what did you do when you were a kid and what did your parents do and how many times have you been married and what went wrong? And we ask a lot of questions like that. And actually, in stepping over that line, that builds a bit more of the trust and genuine connection rather than just a formulaic conversation. So I think it's more about that rather than a male-female thing from my take.
Yeah, and I think we naturally do build more friendships. I've got lots of friends in the industry, kind of in my agencies, people who used to work with. I've got a very broad circle of friends, kind of face-to-face and now virtual, with Facebook and Twitter and things. But I think women can naturally do that. I think it's not necessary. I've never played golf, no intention of taking up the game, in order to kind of play golf with Tesco, whatever. And I don't think you should do anything that's not naturally something that you want to do and something you're comfortable with. I will sometimes, quite pragmatically, if I want to go to theatre, I may go with some other friends in the industry, or at school, I have mapped my school. I know all the parents that are in my industry, kind of class by class. But frankly, I know all the parents that drive past my house, because if you've got 3 kids to get to school and something goes wrong, you need other people with empty seats who are driving past your door on the way to the school in the morning that you can ask for help. So it might sound quite kind of calculating, but it's also about kind of, win-win.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.